Hey everyone, Andrig with Andrig's Aircooled Technology. Wanted to make a video about what cooling system you need depending on kind of your engine specs. So I've created a mathematical model. There's some variables in that model, mostly to do with how you drive, right? So if it's a street-driven car, you're mostly going to be driving, part throttle, except obviously acceleration and things like, climbing steep grades and things like that, right? So, but most of your driving is going to be, partial throttle, not using anywhere close to the total horsepower of the engine, which is why you can have a lot of engines even with a stock cooling system and they'll work. If you don't push the engine too hard for too long, the cooling system can generally keep up. As soon as you push the engine hard, even a stock engine, like where I live, I'm at 5,540 feet above sea level, and I can drive not too far and be, I can take a 40-minute drive and be at 12,000 feet of elevation, right? So when the air is thinner, air density is thinner, that compromises your cooling system. There's just less air. So no matter how good the cooling system might be, there's less air, so you need more cooling capacity. So at altitude, that's also an issue. And then also to that is, what pulley system you're using. So a standard V-belt, stock sized cooling, belt system. So your crankshaft pulley, your alternator or generator pulley, they run on the doghouse fan shrouds. They have about a 1.6 to 1 ratio between crankshaft and alternator or generator. And standard V-belt will only transmit roughly around 6 horsepower, and you'll hit that level with a stock cooling system at about 4,500 RPM. So that's when the belt starts to slip. And the fan will spin faster above 4,500 RPM, but because the belt is slipping, it won't be linear anymore, right? So you won't be getting that 1.6 ratio anymore, and the fan curve will just slowly come over until it just doesn't really spin any faster anymore because the belt's slipping so much. And of course that creates a lot of belt wear. So anyone that's used a standard V-belt on a high performance engine and runs that engine at high RPMs above 4,500 RPM for extended periods of time will certainly notice, considerably faster belt wear, and that they're retensioning their belt more often. That's for sure. If they're checking it. If you're not checking it, you're just getting worse and worse belt slip over time. So with all of that, the best thing to do is really contact me with your engine specs and your driving profile, and I'll kind of guide you. But I'm going to give you at least a rule of thumb here for what it is, what level of cooling, you should be expecting. And here's kind of the options, right? Now I have a broad spectrum of options for performance of these cooling systems. So you have the Evolution 1 fan, which is a little over 11% increase in airflow. You could add a velocity ring to that. That adds another little over 7%. So you're roughly close to about 18.5% cooling capacity. So you can go from 11, a little over 11, to about 18, a little over 18%. Then you've got the Evolution 2 cooling system, cooling fan. So that is almost 29%. So that's kind of your next step up, almost 29% extra cooling capacity. Then you can add a velocity ring to that, and you add another, a little over 7% to that, so 29 and 7. Now you're talking about, 36% increase in cooling capacity. Then you can step up to, from that, those all work in, the OEM and aftermarket 36 horsepower style, doghouse fan shrouds. Then you can skip up to my Evolution fan shroud. So with the Evolution fan shroud and just an OEM doghouse fan, you're going to get 52% increase in cooling capacity. You can add a velocity ring to that and you get another 7%, so you'll be at about 59%. So that's kind of, another step change above. Then you can go to an Evolution 1 complete cooling system, which then combines my Evolution fan shroud with my Evolution 1 fan, and you'll get just under 110% increase in cooling capacity. So yes, that's more than double. So I'm not using 110% to say 10%. I'm saying 110% to say more than double. So I just did the final airflow numbers this week on it. I had only estimates earlier, and my estimates were very conservative. And I really wasn't expecting to go over 100%. I was thinking more this would be like in the 70% range. But the Evolution 1 fan is very restricted in its, ability in the OEM and aftermarket fan shrouds, because those fan shrouds just are restrictive to airflow. So you remove those restrictions to airflow in the design of the fan shroud, and the fan can really shine. So you really make another bit. That's a big step change up to the Evolution 1 cooling system. Then you add a velocity ring to that, and you can get 117% increase in cooling capacity. Then you have the final option, another step change above that, smaller step change, which is the Evolution 2 complete cooling system, and it is 128% increase over stock cooling capacity. So that's, again, more than double. And you can add a velocity ring to that and get to 135% increase. So those are like, huge improvements over anything on the market today. All of this stuff is an improvement really on anything that's typically in the market. I've never been able to get a hold of one of like the Porsche 911 style fan shrouds and fans to see just how much air they actually move. I'm sure they move a lot of air, but that air is not well directed based on experiments I've seen other people actually do. The air is not well directed at the cylinder heads, unfortunately. With the Evolution fan shrouds, so Evolution fan shroud, Evolution 1 and 2 complete cooling systems, those are designed, for the air to go where it's supposed to go. So you get 65% of that airflow going to the cylinder head, 35% going to the cylinders, and it's balanced between both cylinder banks. So you're going to get even cooling, both sides of your engine. Couldn't ask for anything better than that. So I don't know how it compares directly to those, but I suspect it compares very favorably, both in airflow, but also in better cooling because the air is going to the right places. So with that, that's kind of the changes in step changes of performance. Where does that leave you in terms of kind of like horsepower levels and that kind of stuff? So with a stock engine, I would not go a stock or stock-like, very close to stock engine. I wouldn't ever go beyond the Evolution 1. You can overcool the engine. I had somebody with a very close to stock engine put an Evolution 2 cooling fan, the original, not the new one I'm shipping, will be shipping soon, on it, and he was running the Sniper EFI system from Holley, and he couldn't get his cylinder head temp above 200 degrees, so it would never exit learn mode. So that's an example of, you're just overcooling the engine. And of course the new Evolution 2 cooling, fans actually outperformed the original one. So if he had put what I have now on there, he'd really be in trouble, right? And he was in Nevada, it was difficult for him to get it, to actually go out of learn mode and go into closed loop mode. So you don't want to overcool the engine. In his case, probably as well. His oil temps were probably not coming up sufficiently, which then causes tremendous ring wear. If your oil temp isn't at a minimum up to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, you will get excessive ring wear and your engine will not last very long. If you get 30,000 miles out of your engine before you have compression problems, I'd be shocked if you were cooling your oil that much. So So make sure you get your oil temps up that 180 degree range to 215 degrees. That's kind of where you want your oil temp. So horsepower level. So stock engines, nothing more than an Evolution 1 or an Evolution 1 with a velocity ring if you're in like a high altitude area like me, hot climate, high altitude. That will work beautifully for you. You'll get better cooling. And if you're running heater boxes, you'll get much improved airflow into your heat system and your defrost. So that'll even work better. And I have a customer who's attested to that. He was actually like so much surprised how much more heat he got in his car with the Evolution 1. If you then go mild engine, let's say you're in the 85 to about 120 horsepower range, street driven car, you can still get away with the Evolution 1 and a velocity ring for the most part for those cars. Anything above about 120 horsepower, now you're talking Evolution 2 and potentially Evolution 2 with velocity ring into maybe the 160 to 175 horsepower range. Again, it all depends on your driving profile. Race cars that are sitting at 50 to 100% throttle like for long periods of time will need more cooling. So so keeping with that kind of street driven profile, you're going maybe 200 horsepower and above. You're going to want to be exploring the Evolution fan shroud or the Evolution 1 cooling system. You get up to 300 plus horsepower. I have a customer who's putting, I think, a Evolution 1 on a 500 horsepower engine. Don't know, I didn't get a lot of specifics from him in terms of how he's driving that, what is all that power. I'm sure it's some kind of drag car or something like that. But horsepower levels above that, you're talking Evolution 2 cooling system, probably also with velocity ring. So that's kind of my rule of thumb. But contact me. I'll plug kind of your driving profile into the model and direct you kind of in the right place. I just had a customer, in fact, contact me yesterday, or a potential customer, hasn't bought anything yet, and he's got a car here in Colorado that's a turbo car, and he's saying he's making somewhere between 200 and 300 horsepower. He doesn't know exactly, but he told me that his cylinder head temps, like if he did a long climb up a hill, pushing it under boost, his cylinder head temps were hitting 400 degrees. That's a recipe for potential disaster. With a stock head is overheated at about 405 degrees Fahrenheit. So with a stock modified head, I don't think he's definitely not running that. I didn't ask him, but I seriously doubt anyone's running really a stock head anymore on a turbo engine that's running to 200 and 300 horsepower and just welding and porting and polishing like in the old days. So given that, right, I mean, he really needs an Evolution 1 or 2 cooling system because of the altitude and because of the way he drives, and he's turboed under boost, and he's a strip guy, right? So he takes this car, drives it on the street, but he also takes it drag racing, right? So with that, he's, I'm recommending for him, go up to the Evolution, at least 1 cooling system, because that's really what you need, get your head temps down. So, back to that cylinder head, aftermarket cylinder heads can take more heat. At 405 degrees, you're likely to crack the head at the spark plug boss with a stock head casting. That probably won't happen with an aftermarket head, certainly won't, because one, they all use 12 millimeter instead of 14 millimeter spark plugs, so the amount of material is much greater. They've added material in all the aftermarket castings around the combustion chamber, etc. So it actually thicker material transfers heat more effectively as well. So that also helps reduce cylinder head temp. So they can, and the castings are just better in aftermarket heads. So the point at which you would have a problem is probably higher, but one of the things that can happen, aluminum just expands. The hotter it gets, the further it expands. And if it expands far enough, what happens with your seats? They become loose, and you can drop a valve seat. So you don't want cylinder head temps at 400 degrees or higher. Really don't. Now, for short periods of time, maybe you're drag stripping, you're not running any cooling system or whatever, and your head temps hit that. Yeah, I'm sure there's people who can probably tell me, oh, their heads hit that all the time. It's no problem at all. But it's for short duration. So we're talking about, you don't want to build like an off-road racer and be running your cylinder head temps up that high. That's bad. The other thing I wanted to point out too, cooling wise, is a lot of people will talk about how these engines are both air-cooled and oil-cooled. And there's some truth to that. I'm not going to say it's completely wrong. There's some truth to that. But it's not really true. If you actually looked at air engines that are truly oil-cooled, they actually have a passage at the top of the cylinder that revolves around where combustion occurs. So they're actually using the oil to cool the area of the engine where combustion happens. There's no oil in our beloved air-cooled engines here that circulates around the combustion chamber. So we're not truly oil-cooled and air-cooled. We use the same air to cool the oil because we have an oil cooler, and that's fine. And a lot of people just focus on oil temperature. And you can do stuff with, external oil coolers, thermostatic control fans. There's wonderful kits on the market. I love the C-Trap products. I use those in my own builds. And so wonderful products that you can keep your oil temperature cool. That does not mean your cylinder head temps are going to be proper, okay? So keeping your oil temp down is great, but it's only one half of the problem. If you don't know what your cylinder head temps are, even if your oil temps are great, it does not mean your engine is not overheating. Your engine can be overheating. So just keep that also in mind. You really need cooling capacity, not just for the oil, but especially the cylinder heads and the very top of the cylinders. That's where the majority of the air needs to go to cool these engines. In fact, in Type 4 engines, one thing that, if you're familiar with Type 4 engines, when cylinder head temps get above a certain level, thermostatic control of the airflow changes in the Type 4 engine. And what it does is it actually reduces air to the oil cooler to increase the airflow to the cylinder heads. So that gives you the engineering principle that Volkswagen, when they developed the Type 4 engine, right, they understood very clearly that cylinder head temp is the thing that's the most important. You got to keep your cylinder head temps under control. That's what destroys engines, right? So, your oil temp going way too high can destroy your engine too. That's another story. But you wanna, if you want a long-living engine, keep those cylinder head temps down. So that's the real thing. And so these are kind of the horsepower levels matching up to kind of my cooling system products. And hopefully this is useful for you guys. But contact me. You can email me directly at info@andrigsaircooltechnology.com, and I'll respond, fairly quickly to those things and give you some guidance. Just give me some good engine specs. If you don't know horsepower, tell me what kind of cylinder head you have. Tell me what kind of cam you have. Tell me what kind of induction and exhaust system you have. And I can usually kind of ballpark where, kind of power level you're at with that data. So, because a lot of people sometimes will build fairly big engine with, a very mild cam. Some people will build, a smaller engine, but with a very wild cam and heads and all kinds of stuff. So there's so many engine combinations, but I can probably slot you in pretty effectively using the model and your engine specs. So just let me know that. Sorry this took so long, but it's a fairly lengthy process. If you're an engine builder, this is for you. If you build your own engine build, if you're not professional but you build your own engines, this is definitely for you. But also, if you use an engine builder, feel free to share this video with them if you're engaging them for an engine build and you want to make sure you have the right cooling for that engine combination. So appreciate it. Appreciate all the support. Pre-orders are going fairly well on the Evolution 2 fans. Don't have any indication there's any delay in shipping, so that's good. I did an installation video today. Everything's going good there. So appreciate the support. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.